July 2, 1943, Castelvetrano Airfield, Sicily. The pilot of a German Focke-Wulf 190 never saw the P-50 Warhawk diving from above until tracer fire ripped through his fuselage, sending him spiraling into the Sicilian countryside. Behind the Warhawk's guns was First Lieutenant Charles B. Hall, a 22-year-old from Brazil, Indiana. In that moment, Hall accomplished what German commanders had deemed impossible. A black pilot had downed one of the Luftwaffe's elite fighters. The swastika painted onto Hall's P-40L Warhawk that day marked the first of 112 enemy aircraft destroyed by the men the Germans would come to call Schwarze Vogelmenschen, the Black Birdmen. Nazi ideology had classified black people as Untermensch, subhuman, incapable of mastering complex machinery, let alone excelling in aerial combat. Yet high above the Mediterranean, that fiction was unraveling at the hands of the Tuskegee Airmen. By 1943, 992 trained pilots from Tuskegee, Alabama, were entering the skies over Europe. These were not ordinary flyers. They had trained harder and longer than most of their white counterparts, enduring obstacles at every step. For them, combat meant more than duty to country. It was proof to the world that an entire race could master the most demanding role the U.S. Army Air Forces had to offer. The statistics would speak louder than propaganda. 15,000 sorties, 1,578 missions, 112 aerial victories, and a bomber escort loss rate lower than many white units. The experiment the War Department had authorized would shatter both Nazi racial theory and American prejudice. When Charles Hall's guns roared in the skies over Sicily, that burden began to lift. For the first time, the world had proof the Red Tails could fight and win. The 99th Fighter Squadron arrived in Tunisia, attached to the 33rd Fighter Group under Colonel William Mamier, a commander who made no secret of his doubts. He kept them on routine patrols over the Mediterranean, away from the real fight. Mamier wanted proof that black pilots couldn't measure up, and when results didn't come quickly, he had his excuse. Their first combat mission came on June 2, 1943, an attack on the Italian-held island of Pantelleria. The Tuskegee pilots escorted bombers as German fighters appeared. No aircraft were lost, no kills claimed, but the Luftwaffe learned one thing: these men wouldn't break under pressure. Everything changed a month later. On July 2, Charles Hall flew his 8th mission, escorting B-5 bombers over Castelvetrano, Sicily. Two Focke-Wulf 190s bore down on the formation. Hall cut inside, opened fire, and watched his tracers tear into a German fighter. It pitched down and smashed into the ground. When Hall landed, black ground crews erupted in celebration. Months of insults and doubt had been answered with the first aerial victory by a black American pilot. But the struggle wasn't over. By January 1944, the 99th had been fighting for 7 months when Colonel Mamier filed a devastating report. He claimed they lacked aggressiveness and should be pulled from combat. The War Department prepared to shut down the experiment. Then came Anzio. On January 27, 1944, the Luftwaffe unleashed massive raids against Allied forces on the beachhead. 15 Tuskegee pilots, flying worn P-40s, met superior German Focke-Wulfs in the skies. Against the odds, they shot down multiple enemy aircraft. Sources say between 8 and 13 over 2 days. Charles Hall added 2 more kills to his record. In 48 hours, the squadron had destroyed more planes than in the previous 7 months combined. The critics were silenced. A War Department study confirmed the 99th's performance matched white squadrons. The experiment had proven itself. In May 1944, the 332nd Fighter Group was formed, combining the 99th with 3 additional squadrons. They would now escort heavy bombers on long missions into Nazi Germany. Colonel Benjamin O. Davis, Jr. set the tone at Ramitelli Airfield. Our job is not to be aces. Our job is to bring those bombers home. That doctrine, protect the bombers at all costs, defined their legend. In June, General Nathan Twining ordered all fighter groups to carry distinct colors. The 332nd received red. Their P-51 Mustangs gleamed with crimson tails, red nose bands, and propeller spinners. To bomber crews, they became the Red Tails. Many didn't know their escorts were black. They only knew these fighters never abandoned them. Soon, crews across Europe requested Red Tails by name. On July 18, 1944, Their resolve was tested. Colonel Davis led 66 Mustangs to meet bombers over Germany. The bombers were late. Instead of retreating, Davis ordered his men to orbit in enemy skies. When the bombers finally arrived, so did nearly 100 German fighters. For 20 minutes, the air filled with fire. The Red Tails claimed 11 to 12 victories, but 15 B-17s still fell. The 332nd lost 3 pilots, Robert Hutton, Wellington Irving, and Alfred Brown. Their sacrifice was the price of proving history wrong. The Red Tails had faced the full weight of the Luftwaffe and held the line. Critics pointed to the losses at Memmingen as proof that black pilots couldn't handle major battles. But detailed analysis told a different story. The 332nd had entered an impossible situation, outnumbered, outgunned, with German fighters already tearing into the bomber stream. Their defense had prevented disaster, not caused it. By March 1945, the Luftwaffe was broken. Conventional fighters could no longer contest Allied air supremacy, but Germany still had one weapon left, the Messerschmitt Me-262, the world's first operational jet fighter. With speeds exceeding 540 miles per hour, the jet could outrun and outclimb anything the Allies had. For bomber crews, it was a nightmare. On March 24, 1945, the 332nd Fighter Group received its greatest test. The mission: escort bombers on a 1,600-mile round trip to Berlin, striking the Daimler-Benz tank factory. Intelligence warned that Jagdgeschwader 7, the Luftwaffe's jet unit, would intercept. Colonel Benjamin Davis led 43 P-51 Mustangs straight into the heart of the Reich. Over Berlin, the jets appeared, the largest force of Me-262s ever assembled for a single battle. But the Red Tails were ready. Lieutenant Roscoe Brown had studied the jet's weaknesses. "We knew the Germans were faster," he explained. "So instead of chasing, we waited, then turned into their blind spots." Brown closed in, fired 3 long bursts, and watched as the German pilot bailed out from 24,000 feet. Lieutenant Earl Lane accomplished what many believed impossible, scoring a kill with a 2,000-yard deflection shot, aided by the new K-1 for gunsight. Lieutenant Charles Brantley claimed a 3rd jet that day. In a single afternoon, the Red Tails destroyed more Me-262s than most American groups managed in the entire war. For their performance, the 332nd earned a Distinguished Unit citation. Not every encounter ended in victory. 32 Tuskegee pilots became prisoners of war. Lieutenant Alexander Jefferson was among them, shot down on August 12, 1944 during a strafing mission in southern France. Captured and interrogated, Jefferson was stunned by German intelligence. They knew everything about Ramitelli Airfield, our commanders, even my parents' names back in Detroit. At Stalag Luft III, Jefferson found himself treated like any other captured officer. White POWs, many from bomber crews, approached to thank him for Red Tail protection. The irony was inescapable. Here I was, in a Nazi prison camp, treated with more equality than I would be back home, he recalled. Yet when the war ended and he returned to the United States, segregation greeted him the moment he stepped off the ship. In the skies, respect came first from bomber crews. They didn't care about race, only survival. Stories spread about the Red Tails' discipline, their refusal to abandon crippled bombers, their trademark wing waggles and greeting. To the men flying in formation under constant threat, the Red Tails became angels. The numbers backed the legend. Historian Daniel Hallman's research revealed that bombers escorted by the 332nd lost only 27 aircraft to enemy fighters, compared to an average Detroit of 46 under other P-51 groups of the 15th Air Force. And these results came despite flying some of the longest, most dangerous missions of the war. By war's end, the Tuskegee Airmen had demolished every pre-war assumption about race in combat. The record was irrefutable: 1,578 combat missions, over 15,000 sorties, 179 bomber escorts, 112 enemy aircraft destroyed in the air, 150 more on the ground. The experiment had become legend. 3 German jets destroyed in one day, March the 24th, 1945. On the ground, nearly 950 rail cars, trucks, and vehicles wrecked. 250 for locomotives disabled. Even the former Italian destroyer Giuseppe Missori struck beyond repair in June 1944. The numbers told the story. Across 179 escort missions, the Red Tails lost just 27 bombers to enemy fighters, compared to an average of 46 for other P-51 groups. Superior protection, achieved again and again. Individual triumphs added to the legend. Lee Archer, for confirmed victories. Joseph Ellsbury, for more, including 3 Focke-Wulfs in a single day. Edward Toppins, another 4. Clarence, Lucky, Lester, 3 kills in a single mission. Decorations piled up, 96, Distinguished Flying Crosses, 740 for Air Medals, 14 Bronze Stars, 8 Purple Hearts. The 99th Squadron earned 3 Distinguished Unit citations. The 332nd Fighter Group earned one of its own, but the price was steep. 66 pilots killed in action, 32 captured, and 84 more lost in training and non-combat accidents. Their success was no accident. Tuskegee pilots trained harder than anyone. They logged 300 flight hours compared to 200 for white cadets. Formation flying became an obsession. Discipline their secret weapon. The washout rate was brutal. 60% at Tuskegee versus 40% elsewhere. As Commander Noel Parrish observed, they were a super-selected group. Their aircraft told another story. At first, the 99th flew worn-out P-40 Warhawks, already obsolete against German Bf-109S and FW-190S. But the Tuskegee pilots made the most of what they had, using the P-40's turning ability and rugged frame to survive. The arrival of the P-51 Mustang in mid-1944 changed everything. With a Packard-built Merlin engine, a 437 mph top speed, 650 caliber machine guns, and a 1,600-mile range, the Mustang transformed the Red Tails from underdogs into equals of any unit in the war. Behind every pilot stood a legion of unsung heroes. Of roughly 16,000 Tuskegee Airmen, fewer than 1,000 ever flew combat. The rest were mechanics, armorers, crew chiefs, the men who kept the Red Tails flying. At Ramitelli Airfield, resources were scarce, yet their planes were always ready. When German bombs struck the base in March 1944, support crews dragged aircraft from burning fuel dumps under fire, refusing to abandon their work. For the Allies, the stakes of bomber escort could not be overstated. Each B-17 Flying Fortress carried 10 men and cost nearly $250,000. A single loss rippled through the entire war effort. Colonel Benjamin Davis drilled this truth into his men: anyone can shoot down a fighter if they leave the bombers. It takes discipline to stay when the enemy is running. That discipline evolved into a layered defense, close escort weaving above the bombers, medium groups intercepting attackers, and high cover guarding against dives. It required perfect coordination, and it worked. The Tuskegee Airmen fought 2 wars at once, against fascism abroad and racism at home. Their record shattered Nazi racial myths and challenged American segregation. German pilots respected them, calling them the Schwarze Vogelmenschen, the Black Birdmen. Yet many white Americans never even knew they existed, their victories hidden by the War Department. For black newspapers like the Pittsburgh Courier, the Red Tails embodied the Double V campaign: victory over fascism overseas, victory over racism at home. But when victory in Europe came in 1945, the men of the 332nd returned not to celebration, but to uncertainty. Heroes abroad, still second-class citizens at home. While white units prepared for their victory parades, the men of the 332nd Fighter Group faced an uncertain future. Despite their unmatched combat record, the Army Air Forces showed little interest in dismantling segregation. The irony was stark. Pilots, who had proven themselves in the skies over Berlin, returned home to find their heroism dismissed or outright ignored. For decades after World War II, the story of the Tuskegee Airmen remained largely absent from America's mainstream narrative. Individual pilots carried the weight of this erasure. Lee Archer, credited with 4 confirmed victories, went on to a successful civilian career as an executive. Yet he rarely spoke of his time in combat. "Nobody believed me anyway," he later admitted. A black fighter pilot must be lying. His silence was not born from shame, but from the frustration of a nation unwilling to acknowledge the truth. Change began only after the war, slow and uneven. In 1948, President Harry Truman issued Executive Order 9981, integrating the U.S. military. The decision was influenced heavily by the undeniable record of the Tuskegee Airmen. Their performance had shattered every racist assumption about ability and discipline. A few years later, Benjamin O. Davis, Jr., who had once led the Red Tails over the heart of Nazi Germany, rose to become the U.S. Air Force's first black general in 1954. His career stood as a living testament to what the Tuskegee experiment had achieved. Recognition, however, remained elusive. Decades passed before their legacy began to receive the attention it deserved. In 2007, President George W. Bush presented the Tuskegee Airmen with the Congressional Gold Medal, one of the nation's highest honors. Only around 300 of the original pilots lived to attend the ceremony. Many had waited more than 60 years for their country to formally honor what they had accomplished. The numbers remain as solid as the steel of their Mustangs. 112 confirmed aerial victories. 3 German Me-262 jet fighters brought down in a single mission. Over 150 enemy aircraft destroyed on the ground. 27 bombers lost under their protection, compared to an average of 46 in other groups. 96 Distinguished Flying Crosses awarded. These were not legends, they were facts, recorded and verified. Even their enemies knew who they were. German pilots reportedly called the Red Tails the Schwarze Vogelmenschen, black Birdmen, for the Luftwaffe. The red-tailed Mustangs were not a curiosity but a lethal reality. Every bomber saved, every fighter destroyed, every mission completed was another blow against prejudice. Roscoe Brown, who famously downed a German jet over Berlin, later summed up their achievement: "We didn't just fight the Germans. We fought ignorance, prejudice, and hatred, and we won all 3 battles." The Tuskegee Airmen had done far more than survive the crucible of war. They had redefined it. They defeated the Luftwaffe in the skies, exposed the absurdity of Nazi racial ideology, and laid the groundwork for breaking segregation in their own homeland. Their story is not just one of courage, but of transformation, from mockery to respect, from silence to recognition, from the margins of history to its very center. When given the chance to fly, the Tuskegee Airmen soared and changed America forever. Panzer Chronicles.